Charles Fort's The Book of the Damned opens with a bold and subversive premise. Science, despite its claims of objectivity, actively suppresses or ignores phenomena that don't fit into its established frameworks. Fort refers to these rejected facts as the damned, data exiled from respectable discourse, deemed too strange, too inconvenient, or too heretical to be acknowledged. Rather than presenting a dry academic argument, Fort adopts a wry, almost mischievous tone, blending skepticism with satire. He doesn't outright claim that all these anomalies are supernatural or extraterrestrial, but he relentlessly mocks the hypocrisy of scientists who dismiss them without investigation. His central accusation is that mainstream science operates like a dogmatic religion, canonizing certain facts while excommunicating others. Fort introduces his readers to a world where fish fall from the sky, mysterious lights hover in the heavens, and objects, sometimes even living creatures, appear where they shouldn't. These are not fringe superstitions, he insists, but documented events recorded in newspapers, scientific journals, and historical accounts. Yet because they defy conventional explanation, they are brushed aside as hoaxes, hallucinations, or errors. What makes Fort's approach unique is his refusal to replace one dogma with another. He doesn't assert that these phenomena must have a paranormal explanation, only that they deserve serious consideration rather than outright dismissal. He imagines a Super Sargasso Sea, a hypothetical repository where lost things might go, not as a literal theory, but as a poetic challenge to rigid thinking. This introduction sets the stage for the rest of the book, framing it as a rebellion against intellectual gatekeeping. Fort positions himself as a collector of the discarded and the disreputable, forcing readers to confront the unsettling idea that the universe might be far stranger than science is willing to admit. His work is less about proving specific theories than about exposing the flaws in how knowledge is legitimized or damned. The opening of the Book of the Damned is more than just a presentation of oddities. It is a philosophical assault on the very foundations of institutionalized knowledge. Charles Fort does not merely list strange occurrences. He constructs a worldview in which the act of rejecting the inexplicable reveals more about human psychology than about reality itself. From the first pages, Fort establishes himself as a trickster philosopher, wielding irony and paradox to dismantle the authority of so-called experts. He does not claim to have definitive answers for the phenomena he documents. Instead, he delights in the ambiguity, the unresolved tension between what science declares impossible and what the world persistently presents as fact. His tone is that of a man laughing in the archives, sifting through the wreckage of discredited reports and asking, "What if we've been wrong all along?" The damned data he describes are not just outliers, but casualties in a war of epistemology. These are the reports of rains of blood, the sightings of phantom airships before human flight was possible, the accounts of stones falling from empty skies, events that were witnessed, sometimes even investigated, but ultimately exiled from the official record. Fort's genius lies in how he reframes these rejections. He does not argue that every anomaly is real, but he forces the reader to confront the unsettling possibility that the scientific establishment operates on a form of faith, not pure reason. At the heart of his introduction is the idea that orthodoxy is the true heresy. By declaring certain facts impossible, scientists reveal their own dogmatism. Fort compares them to medieval priests, burning inconvenient truths at the stake of peer review. He is particularly scathing about the selective skepticism of experts, how they demand impossible levels of proof for anomalous events, while accepting conventional theories on far shakier evidence. But Fort is not a mere contrarian. Beneath his sarcasm lies a profound question. What does it mean to truly know something? He suggests that the universe is not obligated to conform to human logic, and that the insistence on tidy explanations may blind us to deeper mysteries. His Super Sargasso Sea, a whimsical catch-all for the inexplicable, is less a scientific hypothesis than a metaphor for the vastness of the unknown. It is a place where all the discarded facts go, waiting for someone willing to consider them. This introduction, then, is a manifesto for intellectual rebellion. Fort does not seek to replace one dogma with another, but to open a space where wonder and doubt can coexist. He invites readers to question not just the anomalies, but the very mechanisms by which we decide what is real. In doing so, he transforms the Book of the Damned from a mere collection of curiosities into a radical challenge to science, to society, and to the reader's own assumptions about the nature of reality. By the end of this opening salvo, the stage is set for the parade of the damned that follows, a carnival of the inexplicable, where the only certainty is that certainty itself is an illusion. Fort's true subject is not the anomalies, but the human mind's refusal to face them. And in that refusal, he finds both tragedy and comedy, the endless, absurd dance between what we know and what we dare not admit. The heavens have always been a canvas for human wonder and terror, but in the Book of the Damned, Charles Fort tears open the sky to reveal something far stranger than gods or angels, something that defies explanation with a smirk. This is not a chapter about mere oddities. It is a dismantling of our assumed mastery over the cosmos. Long before UFO entered the lexicon, Fort was cataloging incidents that mocked humanity's fragile understanding of the air above. He begins with the oldest of human confusions, lights where they shouldn't be, glowing spheres drifting against the wind, formations of fire streaking in precise geometries, luminous crafts sighted decades before the Wright brothers conquered the air. These are not the fever dreams of mystics, Fort insists, but reports from farmers, sailors, astronomers, people with no reason to lie and everything to lose by being labeled mad. The sheer mundanity of the witnesses unsettles more than any supernatural claim. What chills is not the existence of marvels, but the fact they were seen by ordinary eyes and promptly erased from history. Then come the airships. Long before dirigibles became reality, newspapers across America and Europe chronicled sightings of phantom vessels, some sleek and metallic, others resembling floating cities. Fort resurrects these accounts with the relish of a gravedigger unearthing inconvenient corpses. The 1896 to 1897 Great Airship Wave is particularly damning. Hundreds of people, including police and journalists, reported a craft with searchlights scanning the land. Authorities dismissed it as mass hysteria, yet Fort notes the eerie consistency in descriptions across states. His implication is clear. Either humanity suffers from collective hallucinations on schedule, or something was truly there, dismissed because it arrived too early for science's liking. But Fort's true brilliance lies in how he weaponizes absence. He highlights cases where objects vanish midair, not in flashes of light, but with the quiet absurdity of a reality that can't be bothered to follow its own rules. Balloons disappear without wreckage. Meteors change trajectory mid-fall. Clouds solidify into temporary architectures before dissolving. These are not just mysteries. They are violations of physics performed with a magician's casual flair. Underlying it all is Fort's unspoken question. Why does the sky refuse to behave? His answer, woven between the lines, is that the universe is not a machine, but a trickster. The aerial phenomena he documents are less about extraterrestrials than about epistemology. They expose how quickly institutions label the inexplicable as impossible. Fort isn't arguing for aliens. He's revealing how thin the veneer of human knowledge truly is when faced with a cosmos that delights in defiance. By the end of this section, the reader is left not with answers, but with a vertiginous sense of the sky's treachery. The atmosphere, once a symbol of the known and the measurable, becomes a theater of the absurd, where lights dance without source, machines appear out of time, and the only certainty is that the heavens are laughing at us. Fort's greatest achievement is making the reader wonder, with a mix of dread and delight, what else might be up there, watching us pretend we understand the rules. There is something primal in the terror of things falling from above, a violation of the natural order that strikes at humanity's oldest fears. But what Charles Fort documents in the Book of the Damned is neither wrathful plague nor divine punishment. It is something far stranger, the casual, almost indifferent way the sky sometimes opens up and rains life upon the earth in a grotesque parody of creation. Frogs, fish, worms, even chunks of meat, all recorded as plummeting from cloudless skies or stormless air, as if the heavens themselves had grown absent-minded and let fragments of another world slip through. Fort's accounts read like pages torn from a surrealist's notebook. In 1873, Kansas City was pelted with frogs, their tiny bodies slapping against rooftops as children screamed and ran. In 1890, blood rained upon an Italian village, coating the streets in crimson, while scientists scrambled to call it dust from the Sahara. In 1857, a field in South Carolina became an abattoir when slabs of meat, some said mutton, others venison, cascaded from a clear blue sky, only for vultures to refuse to touch it. These are not legends or medieval superstitions. They are events recorded in newspapers, witnessed by hundreds, and then promptly exiled from rational discourse. What unsettles most is not the phenomena themselves, but the reactions they provoke. The scientific explanations, when they are offered at all, are flimsier than the events they attempt to dismiss. Tornadoes whisking up ponds full of fish might explain a localized shower of aquatic life. But how to account for falls where only one species descends, untouched by debris or other inhabitants of their ecosystem? Why do these creatures often land within strict geographical boundaries, as if targeted? And most damning of all, why do records of such events span centuries and continents, as though the sky periodically forgets itself? Fort's genius lies in his refusal to provide easy answers. He does not insist on supernatural causes, nor does he wholly dismiss the possibility of mundane explanations. Instead, he lingers in the discomfort of the unexplained, forcing the reader to confront the sheer inadequacy of human knowledge when faced with these bizarre visitations. His infamous Super Sargasso Sea, a hypothetical dimension where lost objects collect before raining back down, is less a scientific theory than a poetic middle finger to dogmatism. It mocks the human need for tidy explanations by offering one that is deliberately absurd, as if to say, "You demand a reason? Here, take this. Now prove me wrong." Beneath the dark humor, however, lies a profound existential challenge. If living things can fall from the sky without warning or reason, what does that say about the stability of reality itself? Fort's catalog of aerial anomalies suggests a universe that is not merely mysterious, but actively capricious. A realm where the laws of nature are not ironclad, but occasional, subject to moments of inexplicable whimsy. The real horror is not the falling frogs or the bloody rain, but the implication that the world operates on a logic entirely alien to human understanding. By the time Fort moves on to his next category of damned data, the reader is left with a queasy sense of disorientation. The sky, once a symbol of transcendence and order, has been revealed as a capricious trickster, one that might at any moment decide to empty its pockets upon our heads without explanation or apology. And the only thing more frightening than the phenomenon itself is the realization that, somewhere in the archives of the damned, there may already be a record of worse things yet to fall. There is a particular horror in absence, in the space where something, or someone, once was. Charles Fort, in the Book of the Damned, does not merely document disappearances. He dissects them with the precision of a surgeon operating on the thin membrane between reality and impossibility. People, objects, even entire ships vanish without wreckage, without witness, without reason, not in the shadows, but in plain sight, as though the universe itself has casually erased them. And sometimes, just as inexplicably, they reappear elsewhere, as if spat out by dimensions beyond human comprehension. Fort's accounts read like scenes from a cosmic horror story, stripped of melodrama and left raw with their bureaucratic chill. Take the case of the Mary Celeste, that infamous ghost ship found adrift in 1872. Its crew vanished, their last meal still on the table, the ship's log eerily mundane up until the moment it simply stopped. Official explanations, mutiny, storms, madness, crumble under scrutiny, leaving only the abyss of the unanswered. But Fort does not stop at sea mysteries. He drags forth cases of men who stepped into courtyards and never stepped out, children who wandered into empty fields and left no footprints, entire villages found deserted, their meals still warm, their livestock untended. These are not fairy abductions or supernatural fictions. They are cold, documented facts reported by police, journalists, and terrified neighbors. Then there are the reappearances, the flip side of the void's coin. Fort chronicles incidents where people or objects materialize where they have no earthly business being. A man is seen in 2 cities at once, confirmed by multiple witnesses in both locations. A letter drops from an empty sky into a farmer's field, its postmark from a town hundreds of miles away. Soldiers in battle swear they saw comrades blink out of existence mid-step, only to be found later, unharmed and confused, in distant trenches. These are not the stuff of occult legend. They are records from court transcripts, military reports, and newspapers, data damned for the crime of being too impossible to process. What makes Fort's treatment of these phenomena so unsettling is his refusal to cloak them in mysticism. He presents them with dry, almost clinical detachment, as though compiling case studies for a trial against reality itself. His point is not to prove ghosts or interdimensional travel, but to expose the arrogance of a scientific establishment that dismisses what it cannot explain. If people can vanish without cause, if matter can teleport without mechanism, then the bedrock laws of physics are not just incomplete, they are laughably naive. Underneath the litany of disappearances lies Fort's true subversion, the suggestion that existence is not stable but porous, that at any moment the fabric of the world might fray and something or someone might slip through the cracks, leaving behind only questions. The horror is not in the vanishing, but in the implication that it could happen to anyone at any time, without warning or reason. And the greater horror still is that somewhere, in some forgotten archive, there may already be a record of it happening to you. By the end of this chapter in The Damned, the reader is left staring at empty spaces, doorways, streets, the gaps between seconds, and wondering what might be waiting there, just beyond the edge of the visible. Fort's genius is in making the ordinary world feel like a stage set, its props and actors liable to be whisked away the moment the cosmos decides the play no longer amuses it. The dead are not supposed to linger. This is the unspoken rule of the rational world, a boundary between the seen and the unseen that science has worked hard to fortify. Yet in the Book of the Damned, Charles Fort gathers his most damning evidence not from the fringes of folklore, but from the cold, ink-stained pages of police reports, court transcripts, and the correspondence of men who had no reason to lie. What emerges is not a collection of campfire tales, but a dossier of the impossible, meticulously recorded and systematically ignored. Consider the case of the Bell Witch, not as legend, but as legal history. A Tennessee farmer in the early 1800s plagued by an entity that spoke in riddles, pinched the children black and blue, and once, according to sworn testimony, forced a local school teacher to vomit pins for hours. Or the Amherst poltergeist of 1878, where a teenage girl's torment by an invisible force was investigated by a magistrate who watched, baffled, as flying cutlery scored the walls around her. These are not whispered stories. They are events that left paper trails, sworn affidavits, the sweat-stained records of men who encountered something that defied their understanding of the world. Fort's brilliance lies in his juxtaposition. Alongside these violent hauntings, he places the quiet apparitions, the businessman who sees his dead wife buying gloves on a crowded street, the lighthouse keeper who converses with a drowned sailor for hours before learning the man had been dead for weeks. These are not the stuff of Gothic fiction, but dry, factual accounts, where the terror lies in their very banality. The dead do not return draped in chains or howling for vengeance. They stand politely in daylight, as real as the postman, until the moment their existence becomes impossible. Then, there are the poltergeists, those uninvited guests who treat the laws of physics as suggestions. Fort catalogs houses where stones fall from ceilings with no hole to mark their passage, where crockery arranges itself into impossible pyramids mid-air, where bedsheets strangle sleepers with the precision of invisible hands. Crucially, he notes how often these phenomena cluster around adolescents, particularly girls on the cusp of womanhood, as though puberty were not just a biological change, but a temporary thinning of some cosmic veil. What makes Fort's treatment revolutionary is his refusal to classify. He does not claim these phenomena are spirits, psychic projections, or dimensional echoes. He simply presents them as facts that have been excluded from the official narrative. His skepticism cuts both ways. Just as he mocks scientists who dismiss hauntings outright, he lampoons spiritualists who too eagerly claim proof of the afterlife. The truth, Fort implies, is far stranger than either camp dares admit. Underneath the accounts runs Fort's subversive current, the suggestion that consciousness might not be bound by the brain, that emotion could under certain conditions manifest as physical force, that the line between the living and the dead is less a wall than a revolving door occasionally left ajar. The true horror of these chapters is not the idea that ghosts exist, but that they might simply be the most visible symptom of a universe far more malleable and far less rational than we've been taught to believe. By the time Fort moves on to cosmic anomalies, the reader is left with a disquieting realization. If the dead can walk, if a teenager's anguish can shatter Newton's laws, then reality is not the solid edifice we imagine, but a flickering projection, one that, given the right conditions, might momentarily reveal the scaffolding behind the stage. And no one, not even the most hardened skeptic, can say for certain what else might be standing there in the wings, waiting for its cue. The deeper Charles Fort digs into the archives of the damned, the more the cosmos itself begins to feel like a prankster, one with a particularly dark sense of humor. Here, in the realm of falling stars that aren't stars, mountains that shouldn't exist, and stones that move when no one is looking, the very ground beneath our feet and the sky above our heads become untrustworthy conspirators in reality's grand farce. Fort begins with the stones, because even the earth's bones refuse to behave. He exhumes reports of geological heresies, boulders perched precariously on slopes they should have rolled down millennia ago, rock formations that hum in frequencies just beyond human hearing, slabs of granite etched with markings that resemble language but refuse to be deciphered. Then there are the wandering stones of Death Valley, those infamous slabs that slide across dry lake beds, leaving trails in the cracked earth as if dragged by invisible hands. Scientists would later claim it was wind and ice, but Fort, with a raised eyebrow, notes how these explanations always arrive decades after the fact, long enough for the witnesses to die and the damned data to be buried under respectable theories. But the Earth's misbehavior is nothing compared to the sky's outright mockery. Fort resurrects accounts of black rain that stained European villages in 1862, not with soot, but with something gelatinous and unidentifiable. He chronicles the star jelly phenomenon, blobs of quivering organic matter found after meteor showers, sometimes still warm, that evaporate before they can be analyzed. Most damning are the meteorites that shouldn't be, chunks of metal falling from space that, when analyzed, prove to be alloys impossible to form naturally, or stones bearing markings too regular to be random. In 1819, a French geologist documented a limestone block that fell from the sky, a rock that, by all laws of geology, could only have formed underwater. The scientific community's solution? They accused the geologist of fraud and forgot the incident. The true brilliance of Fort's approach lies in his juxtaposition of scale. A single anomalous pebble is a curiosity. 100 become an indictment. When he presents case after case of thunderstones, flint axes supposedly forged by lightning strikes, found embedded in solid rock, he isn't arguing for ancient aliens or lost civilizations. He's demonstrating how academia's knee-jerk skepticism creates more paradoxes than it solves. If all these witnesses are liars or fools, why do their mistakes keep repeating across centuries and continents? Beneath the catalogue of oddities thrums Fort's central heresy, that nature may not have laws, but habits, and sometimes it breaks them. The universe in these chapters emerges not as a clockwork mechanism, but as a capricious artist, occasionally tossing out impossible creations just to see if we're paying attention. The most terrifying implication isn't that these anomalies exist, but that they might be the leaks in reality's dam, hints of a cosmos where the rules were never fixed to begin with. By the time Fort turns his gaze to human oddities, the reader is left with vertigo. The ground is no longer solid, the sky no longer predictable. Even the stones have secrets. And the only thing more unsettling than these aberrations is the realization that, for everyone Fort documented, 100 others were likely damned to oblivion by the gatekeepers of knowledge. Lost fragments of a puzzle we're not even supposed to know exists. Charles Fort does not conclude the Book of the Damned with answers. He does not offer a grand unified theory of the anomalous, nor does he descend into mystical proclamations. Instead, he leaves us with something far more dangerous, a question that gnaws at the foundations of knowledge itself. What if we have been wrong about what it means to know anything at all? The true subject of Fort's work is not the damned data, but the act of damnation, the mechanisms by which science, society, and the human mind exile the inexplicable. His philosophy is not one of belief, but of radical doubt, not just toward the anomalies, but toward the systems that dismiss them. He reveals how the scientific establishment, for all its claims of objectivity, operates on a kind of theology, a faith in certain laws that must be defended at all costs, even if it means ignoring, ridiculing, or falsifying evidence that contradicts them. Fort's greatest insight is that the universe owes us no explanations. It does not care for our categories, our laws, our desperate need for order. The anomalies he chronicles, falling frogs, phantom airships, sentient storms, are not exceptions to reality, but reminders of its true nature, chaotic, capricious, and utterly indifferent to human comprehension. The damned data are not outliers, they are glimpses behind the curtain, moments when the cosmos forgets to perform its carefully rehearsed act of predictability. What makes Fort's philosophy so enduring and so unsettling is that it is not a call to abandon science, but to expand it. He does not reject reason, he rejects dogma. His work is a plea for humility, for the recognition that every generation's laws of nature have eventually been revised or overturned. The true enemy, Fort suggests, is not ignorance but certainty, the arrogant assumption that we have already mapped the boundaries of the possible. By the book's final pages, the reader is left not with closure, but with a delicious, vertiginous unease. The world is no longer a stable, knowable place, but a flickering projection, one that occasionally glitches, revealing glimpses of something vaster and stranger, lurking just beyond the edges of perception. The damned data are not mistakes, but clues, fragments of a reality too vast to be contained by our current frameworks. Fort's ultimate legacy is this: he turns the reader into a heretic. After the Book of the Damned, one cannot look at a falling star, an odd weather pattern, or even a misplaced set of keys without wondering, what else have we been taught to ignore? The true horror and the true exhilaration is the realization that the anomalies will continue, with or without our permission. The universe is under no obligation to make sense to us. And perhaps, Fort whispers in his final sly provocation, that is exactly what makes it worth studying. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.